I'm going to assume a bunch of housekeeping stuff. We will be using breakout rooms, and we might use a Slido tool. I can explain any of those if you're not familiar with them. I hope that's okay to assume that. If you have got any questions, just pop them in the chat, and Debbie brilliantly is going to, stop me or read those out or whatever, or respond. Okie doke. So without further ado, I just wanted to introduce myself a little bit more, and mainly because what qualifies me to come and run a session like this, because in one of half of my role for the Brave Day Trust, I've also been a beneficiary. So I can talk a little bit more about that in a sec. So I'm not really into self-promotion, so please don't think that these two book covers are self-promotion. They're not. They are hyperlinked. So these are the two areas of my work. So the first area on the right, empowerment and agency for well-being development, is one of the areas of my work. It's what I did my doctorate in, and I've hyperlinked this. So when you get the slide deck, you can go to it, because all of the stuff we've done, we made open access. So there's a bunch of stuff that I might be referring to in there. The second one on the left-hand side, the evaluation side. So one side of my work is about well-being development, and the other side is about having great impact. And that's obviously what we're talking about here today. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to click on this hyperlink straight away. So for those people, and I have conversations with folks like this all the time, that like, just tell me what to do, give me the tool, which tool should I use to evaluate this project? Okay, I'm going to answer that straight away. And then I hope we can park it. You might even leave the call, I don't know. I hope not, because actually the why, how and what, the why first part, the Simon Sinek kind of model, is really important. So starting with why is really important. But I know, practically speaking, people want the what. Just tell me what tool to use. So I'm going to, this will be in the chat, and Debbie, you could put it in the chat now, but I'm going to hyperlink to it straight away. So as you'll see, interestingly, it can't be self-promotion, because I've clicked on the American website for the book, but I'm not particularly interested in the book. What I want to show you is this online resources, and I can assume that that's gone across there. Debbie, you're on the right, I'm on the right screen there, aren't I? You can see the online resources.
Yeah, Sage Promising online resources.
Yeah. I'm always paranoid that it switches screens and it doesn't for you. So I'm going to click on these online resources, and this is a companion website that some books have. And if let's go, for example, to evaluation tools, what you'll see is a bunch of tools. So if what you're looking for is a tool to kind of evaluate your practice, here's a bunch of examples. The book is creative tools, so they are all creative. I'll click on one and give you an example. Blob people, everybody's heard of blob people, right? If you haven't, this is what they look like, and you might ask people to reflect on their experience or how they're feeling today or whatever. So what we've done is we've created these online resources, what you'll need, how you prep for it, the process step by step, the actual tool, how you analyze it. Really important, because we always think about, okay, what tool do we use, and we don't think about how to analyze the data or who's going to do that. And then we've put a quick strengths and weaknesses for each tool at the bottom. Okay, so there's some tools that you can use. Let's a bit more of a traditional one. Let's find Rosenberg self-esteem inventory, any inventory, quite frankly. So we've talked about it, talked about its history, what you'll need step by step, how you analyze it, and its strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so if you want tools, that is where you can find tools. So please go and have a look. So what I'm going to do is not focus on that. So for those folks that really love to have an immediate takeaway, there you go, you've got it. So what I'm going to talk about it is more about the how, okay, and then we'll get on to the what, and then I'm going to recap a little bit on the why that Bobby covered. So my contact details on there, really happy to have any conversations to follow up. Just to say a little bit more about myself. I'm currently part-time head of research and development at Brayley Trust, who have been a beneficiary on multiple Catalyst programs actually, and I know folks in the room because we're peers on multiple projects. I soon will be leaving, in fact 10 days time, to go freelance, and so this is part of that freelance role, so quite a transition phase for me. More about me, head of research, freelance, writing a current book that updates this one actually, and it's more of a practitioner guide to participatory research, which is quite exciting. When I'm going to do that, I'm not quite sure, but probably after 10 days time. So there we go. Okie dokie. So just to give you a little bit more detail before I ask you folks to say a little bit more about yourself. So here's a reminder really of the lens that we're looking through. So the why, the how and the what. And again, this is from Simon Sinek's book. And so we really want to focus now, having Bobby done a fantastic job on the why and kind of really encouraging us to think about, you know, what do you want to know? What are your questions kind of thing? Now we're going to go, okay, how do we come to know it? And what do we actually do? I'm going to talk about a few key components of impact to help break it down a little bit. And I'm going to keep things super simple because that is my preference and we can build from there. Okay, so I'm going to introduce the concepts or components of research, development and innovation and evaluation and how they all combine to form impact. Also going to introduce the big guns. So theory of change for me is at the heart of anything related to impact. And we're going to spend quite a chunk of time on that. You may be thinking, my organisation or my service has already got a theory of change. Brilliant. Kind of drag it out. I don't know, blow off the dust, or it could be really relevant. You're using it all the time. Brilliant. That's fab. And what I will encourage you to do is to question and challenge what evidence base your theory of change is based on. And really, we're going to dig into that a little bit more. And then we can establish these questions that Bobby was talking about last time. What do you want to know? What are your questions? And let's relate that to the theory of change. Let's use theory of change as a framework to understand what we want to know and how we go about knowing it. Okay. And then we're going to develop, and I can show you a tool again to develop a plan, an impact measurement plan. Measurement is in parentheses deliberately because I am going to challenge that statement in a minute. So how do you go about exploring your questions? What do you actually do? Okay, so that is the intro. I'm pausing for breath and giving Debbie an opportunity to tell me if there's anything in the chat that I need to pay attention to, because I haven't got the chat open. Maybe I should have that open.
It's nothing there, but it's good to reminder to let people know that they can post questions while you're talking, and I will keep an eye on it. So do if something comes up, type in the chat and I'll keep it up and bring it up.
That's great. Thank you. Okie dokie. So what I wanted to do is hear a little bit more from you. Maybe not hear it, maybe in the chat, it doesn't matter. And I wanted to remind you, or indeed, if you're viewing this for the first time, this is the first Jamboard that Bobby did last time. And her question was, what does impact mean to you? So that whole thing, like, what is impact and all of that. And what I'd really love for you to do in a minute is annotate which one is resonating most for you. Okay, having reflected on the session last time, or you might be coming fresh to it this time, which one of these is resonating most for you? Now, for those folks who aren't familiar with the annotate function, I think if you hover over the top or go to view, you'll get your bar and there'll be an annotate pen, hopefully. And once you click on that annotate pen, you can do a stamp or any kind of tick or circle around one of the post-it notes that's resonating for you most about what impact means to you. Okay. If that's not working for you, you can just pop the word or the phrase in the chat. Okay, it doesn't matter. Okay, it is working. Yay. Thank you, Aaron. That's a relief. And what I want you to do as you're kind of annotating on there is I want to remind you that Bobby asked you there what impact means to you. She didn't ask you what impact measurement means from you. So just separate those out in your head for a moment. What does impact mean to you? And we've got some people annotating already. That's brilliant. And it's a bit of a spread. We've got a bit of a cluster about realizing our charitable mission, a cluster of 2, but it's mainly a spread. Okay, I'm going to give people a moment to keep annotating though. Okay, fab. I'm doing that thing where I've got 2 screens. So when I'm looking over here, I'm not being rude and going, oh, it's boring. I'm looking at my other screen. Can we have the link, please? Oh, I'm not sure I've got the link. Debbie might be able to find the link, but I did it from a screenshot actually. I'm pretty sure the jump.
Yeah, you do the annotation in the Zoom. So the top you can see the green. You are viewing, Lucy, and then there's view options, and then there is annotate, and if you click on that you can get a stamp or an arrow. But if that doesn't work, as Lucy said, just copy the chat over in the chat, copy the line.
I think sometimes if you use the web-based version, it has limited options on Zoom. I'm not sure, but yeah, please pop it in the chat. Brilliant. Thank you, Tina, for doing that. Okay, so I'm actually very grateful to Tina for putting that in the chat, because the word understanding is, I think, a really important word. And if I look at this and the one to follow, the reason I asked you to separate out impact from measurement is I'm not sure how helpful measurement is when we start to think about impact measurement. Because actually the word measurement is quite a traditional word, it's quite scientific. I wonder if it turns people off and they go, oh, I'm not a researcher. And so looking at the things on the screen there, to me, words like understanding, like Tina's used, better words for looking at that are exploration, investigation. So, you know, that they're kind of things I would like you to kind of bring into the dialogue, bring into your thoughts today. Thank you for annotating that, incredibly helpful. And that, yeah, there's some clusters, particularly around the bottom one there, how users have benefited from our work. Yeah, and we are totally going to be talking about that. Okie dokie. Just gonna, oh, it's because I'm still on annotate. Sorry, hold on. I will go out and come back in again. Thanks for bearing with. Okay, we're back in. So I'm just going to scoot forward a slide and show you this one, which is where Bobby started to ask you, you know, what's your organisation service? What are you interested in? What do you want to know? So what are your questions? And that was very helpful to kind of that why of questioning why you're doing what you're doing, rather than, oh my goodness, we just need to run a survey to prove to our funder that we have met their needs and all of that kind of stuff. So this was really helpful, and so I've put it up there just as a reminder, and also to say I'm going to speak to a couple of the things, most of the things on here. So things like value for money, I am going to speak to that briefly, but I am going to speak to it. Are the team effective? Things like that. Definitely we're going to cover these. So that's really cool. Okie dokie. So that whole thing about what you want to know, what are your questions, it's all about kind of, well, you know, what is knowledge, who can know stuff, how do you go about knowing it? And they've got really big words in the research literature that we're not going to talk about it, but if you are interested in ontology, epistemology, methodology, then go to that book, have a little look. We do all of that, but we're not going to talk about that. We're really going to keep it basic of what do you want to know and how do you go about knowing it. Okie dokie. And so some of the things that I'm also going to challenge are things like I've said about measurement. What about explore or investigate? They may be more helpful words. Other things like results. I'm not sure that's a helpful word. What about findings? Okay, findings we can apply and we can do something with, we can grapple with them. And one of the other things, and this came out last time actually, was that before and after measurement thing. I'm absolutely going to challenge that. And I think someone brought it up in the last session. Who was it? I wrote it down because it was brilliant. I think it was it Tracy from Salford CVS? I don't know if Tracy's on the call today, but anyway, brilliant. And what Tracy said was, things got worse. When we measured it before and after, things got worse. And it's like, yes, yes. So is that the right way to be measuring stuff? No, because really, have you made it worse? I mean, you should be looking at that from a quality perspective. But I think when we apply tools or approaches before and after measurement to the social sciences, and we've kind of brought them in from traditional sciences, do they actually work for us? And so I did a bit of research on this. It was very small scale, and we played about with, because we'd been getting decreased scores. So something like, I don't know, self-esteem, measured before and after, and people's scores decreased, and we were like, oh, like this isn't good. But when we looked at it, what had happened is their awareness had increased through our program. And if there's something, the other part of my work is about wellbeing development, we call that a process of awareness, choice, action. That's what we do to support people to become empowered in their lives. So if that first stage is awareness raising, that suggests that they may be unaware at the beginning. So why are we measuring then? It doesn't work for us. So what we could do is measure at the end retrospectively and say, how would you score yourself on your self-esteem before, and how would you score yourself now? You can still get a change score, but it's probably more accurate because they're aware then. And we tested this out. Did it give us good findings? And it did. It was much more accurate. So it's like, hang on, we could reject a few things that we might kind of have brought with us from some of those traditional models, or how it's supposed to be from the traditional sciences, that might just not be helpful. So a real healthy dose of challenge stuff is what I'm asking for. Other things you might like to challenge: data-driven. I actually think I agree with data-driven, but there's loads of types of data. And are you kind of triangulating or looking at things from different data to help you with that, or relying on one source? Because one source might not be helpful in that data-driven approach. I'm going to, as I said, make a nod to return on investment. That was talked a little bit about last time, but and I'm going to challenge it, if I'm honest. And so I'll do that partway through this session. Okie dokie. So just to really summarize that, why impact? And this is what I was hearing from watching the recording, because I didn't attend Bodby's session. I'm kind of chucking in my own views on it. So I think what was being said last time, and certainly something that I believe, is often we are reactive and funder driven. We want to prove so as we can get more funding or whatever. And actually, I know that's a reality, but is it the best place to be? Could we be more proactive and strategic about impact? And what I'm saying there is, actually, could we be creating an impact culture? And again, someone last time, I can't remember who it was now. I do know it was someone from Turn to Us, and I happen to know Turn to Us. It was about 39 minutes in, if you're interested in watching the recording, and they were talking about having a learning culture and having a mindset and all of this sort of stuff. Now, I know from the leadership of that organisation that they totally have got an impact culture. That's what they're doing. So people are given the space, the resource, it's within the culture. And Brené Brown talks about this. She's one of my gurus because she's a social researcher. But she talks about equipping people. If we want them to have hard conversations, we need to equip them and give them time and the tools to have hard conversations. It's the same with impact. If we want to have this great impact, we need an impact culture, and we need to help people with time and resource to do that. Okay. So for me, it's about seeing an impact statement as important as a mission statement. It's things like that, where it's embedded within our culture. So as we can really articulate and evidence our contribution, that's what it's all about. And understanding that contribution within the wider context within which you're working. It's really important. I think it's particularly important in partnership working and in new partnerships, and that was talked about last time as well. And that collective impact is a bit of a holy grail, I think. But if you were all kind of on the same way of kind of trying to find out about how your service or project or whatever is collectively meeting these people's needs, I mean, that's awesome. And the bottom line is ensuring we're always needs-led. And we're always accountable. What are the current needs, and are we meeting them for ourselves, for our service users, for all the stakeholders? So that's the bottom line. Okay, and so here we go. It's not just about measuring, it's about investigating or exploring. And this was said last time, it's not just about proving, which measurement sort of alludes us to. It's also about improving. And those things that I talked about before, it's not about results, maybe that culture kind of grates with me, but it is about findings, and we want to apply those findings. So let's get curious, let's get investigating is what I say. Okay, so I talked about introducing 3 different components of research, of impact. And these are what I think are the key components, and they're just helpful starting places. And also it's the language that we might have heard a lot before. So if we break them down, it might break it down and make it more helpful for us. And I believe that this is a cycle. I've been really influenced recently through involvement with Catalyst, and in particular I've been directed, obviously we've all been directed and seen design thinking. You might have been familiar with that before. I was not, and I love it. And also lean impact. It's hyperlinked actually, so I don't know, Debbie, I think I've put that to go in the chat. Yeah. So lean impact is Anne-May Chang, and she's done a couple of great things. If you YouTube watch her, get down that YouTube rabbit warren, you will find loads of different stuff on her, and a great book. But that whole cycle, the iterative cycle of impact not being static, but measure, done, tick. It's iterative, it's a cycle. And so these elements within this are a cycle. So you might have questions that are more research questions. What is going on for young people? I'm from a youth background. What's going on for young people in this phase of COVID? What's going on for them? And you might be, through this Catalyst involvement, developing, growing, changing, setting up new services or projects or whatever. And so you're that whole part of the innovation, you're using design thinking in that, you'll be familiar with that. And then you might be moving into an evaluation phase. Did that work? Didn't that work? What worked? What particular element? And then you'll go back to, okay, so now my question is, okay, 20 and 21-year-olds, what's their experience currently with COVID? Because I think it could be a bit different. And so, those different research type questions, you might adapt your project or whatever, develop it, test out, all of those sort of things. And then obviously you might evaluate that. So they're really the 3 components that I think are really helpful. And because of where we're all at with our Catalyst journey, we might be moving into the evaluation part. That might be a helpful thing for us to focus on, and that's probably what I'm going to bias towards today. So yeah, okay, so at the heart of this is theory of change. Okay, and this is a super helpful framework that I think should be our starting place, and it's certainly at the center of what I believe, and anything involved with impact should be starting with theory of change. Okay, so what is theory of change? Some of you might be really familiar with this, others it might be the first time you're even hearing this, I don't know. So what I'm going to do is go through it a bit and introduce it. And I'm particularly going to introduce a model of theory of change that I love, and I just think it's really helpful. And what I'd encourage you to do is play along. So as I go through this on your blank piece of paper or digital version, just start completing or building your theory of change. It could be one that you have before, or you could be bringing fresh stuff to that, or completely blank sheet of paper, starting over. So play along. And that theory of change could be for your organization, for your project, for your service. I don't know, it could be macro, micro, wherever you want to do. Yeah, play along. Okay. The particular model that I'm going to introduce you to as a framework for impact is based on NPC. I am an absolute fan of NPC, and when I saw that there was someone from NPC on the call, I was like, brilliant, hopefully I could draw them in. Also being slightly nervous, because whenever you're quoting other people's work, it's always a little bit of a worry. And so that NPC and CYI, so NPC is New Philanthropy Capital, CYI is Centre for Youth Impact. They are my go-to resources. They're both hyperlinked. I think Debbie can put those in the chat, but you don't need to get distracted, or if you want to go off and play with them, you know, feel free. But what they say about theory of change, NPC firstly, they say it's a process that encourages us to reflect on our aims and plans, to discuss them with others and to make them explicit, so nothing assumed. We see this process as the foundation of charitable strategy, evaluation and communication. Brilliant, that's what I'm talking about. Theory of change according to CYI. And I'm a massive fan of CYI as well, because I was a founding trustee, no longer a trustee, but I was a founding trustee. And also they might be a good person for people to go on to afterwards, because they do regional network meetings. And so it's all about impact. And yes, it's youth, but it's broader than youth, it is social sector. So I would encourage you, that they've got great impact network meetings all over the country. So go along to them, and you can find out about them on their website. What they say is theory of change is just that. It's the theory or the thinking or the set of ideas developed by all those involved about how, there we go, provision creates change with and for young people or whoever your beneficiaries are. It's both a process of consultation, reflection and engagement, and an output, usually a diagram or image. And what you might have seen if you've Googled theory of change, as I did, are these beautiful, awesome infographics that look fabulous. And you're like, wow, yeah. I certainly look at some of those and go, oh, that's awesome. So if you think of that, I'm trying to use design thinking language as kind of quite high fidelity, like, you know, they have gone through it to get to these. If you rewind a little bit, we're going to do a very low fidelity prototype, and we're going to build that throughout the next sort of 20 minutes. I am not a designer, I'm not good at any of those things, but all of these people will have been through the process that we're just about to go through. Okay, and so it could look like that in the end, or more beautiful, I don't know. So what I would encourage you to do is on your blank piece of paper or whatever, take notes or just listen, it's up to you. I just would like you to think about the context, okay? And again, this is adapted from NPC. So what is going on in the context within which you're operating? This could be the different stakeholders, who's in there, what are their needs? Also, what are their assets? I think we often forget about their assets. What else is going on funding wise, policy wise? What is the context within which you're operating? Okay. And context is really important. And I think it might often have been forgotten in some theory of change. Because once you know your context, you are able to then say, okay, this is our small contribution to this context. Okay, these are the needs we're trying to make. And that's your impact statement. That's the difference you're trying to make. You know, I linked impact statement and mission statement. I think that they're very similar in that sense, but an impact statement shows the change. So it might be an increase of this, that, and the other, decreasing this. So that's the impact is the contribution you want to make to that context. Okay. Outcomes, we hear about outcomes a lot. In fact, I think as a sector, we might have got a little bit outcomes obsessed. But ultimately, outcomes really should be a breakdown of the more specific indicators that participants achieve in having an impact in that context. Okay, the key there is participants achieve outcomes. We don't. So it's the change that participants are making, and that could be an increase of this, a decrease of that. Okay, so they break down the impact and give indicators of that change. This is the stuff we do. Mechanisms of change is the conditions we create and how we go about enabling participants to achieve those outcomes that has that impact in that context. And I remember someone in the first session that Bobby ran, they were talking about causality. Okay, so if we do this, can it cause this? And this is what I'm talking about. Do things stack up? Is it logical? So this could be include your philosophy, your values, the activities you do when you do them, and all of those kind of things. It's the stuff that you can do. So as participants have a chance at achieving those outcomes. And lastly, quality. Okay, and quality was a wonderful addition from NPC when they started to include it in theory of change templates. So this is about what does good look like, and how can we consistently achieve good across different programs, projects, practitioners. You know, what is that consistent thing? And see why I have recently done a great podcast. I should have put that in the chat. I'll put a note to do it, on focusing on the core components. So if we focus on these core components, we're really sure that participants will achieve those outcomes and have that impact. And it's really helpful to try and move away from outcomes and focus on the stuff that we can change and do. Okay. The other thing that's a really helpful introduction is this line of accountability. Okay. And I think it was introduced, I don't know, a number of years now, but previous theory of change frameworks hadn't got this. And I was so grateful for it when it came along, because what it's saying is, because this context is so crazy, and a lot of our services operate in a pretty crazy world, there's so much else going on for participants or whoever we're working with, service users. Can we really say that our project meant that change? Or indeed, if they go downhill, should we be taking responsibility for that kind of thing? Or actually, there's a lot going on in the world. But what we can take responsibility for is the stuff to the left. Okay, we know that our project worked towards these outcomes. Impact, which is potentially, and again, this was talked about last time, it's longer term. You know, we might not see impact for 3 months, a year, we don't know. And we can look to follow people, to track progress, to keep in touch with them. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But actually, it's much harder, harder to keep in touch with people once they leave our service or things like that. And so what if we focused on stuff to the left of the line, which we can be a bit more certain about? I was so grateful. So I could say to fundraisers, please don't promise all of that, because I don't know if I can, measure or evidence that. But say this, and say that, our project is making a contribution to this in this context. And it was really helpful. And it also helps us maybe think of other terms, other language that you might have heard here. So, for example, you might have heard of short-term and intermediate outcomes, where you break it down a little bit. So you might see an increase of this and an increase of that later. And that's really helpful to think of outcomes as shorter term and more intermediate term, and indeed longer term. You might also think about or hear the language of outputs. So that could be I always think of it as numerical, the number of people that use the service, the number of people that did that, and indeed inputs. So that would be in the mechanisms of change thing. How many of this we did, how much of this we did. So that can be helpful to think about that language. Okay. So you might have seen these in loads of different ways. There are so many different ways of drawing a theory of change, designing a theory of change, and all of those. So you might have seen it like this, where you've got those lines linking things, causality again. You might have seen it like this, going this way, and here again there's the intermediate outcomes in there, which is helpful to see that this is broken down, the mechanisms and change in the activity as well, so that there's loads of different ways to do this, and it's whatever works best for you. I just preferred the way I just showed you, because I don't know, I like the context, and I like remembering, hang on, we're a small piece in the puzzle here, and let's be really specific on that. Okie dokie, so I am going to pause. We're 45 in. I'm not doing too bad, actually. I'm surprised at myself. I've done a lot of talking, and I did give you a bit of a pre-warning of that, so I hope it's okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to pause, I'm going to shut up, and we're going to go into breakout rooms, so as you can really go, oh, okay, I just want to check in here. Did I understand this right? What's resonating for me? What does this mean to me? What questions have I got? So we're going to give you an opportunity to do that, and you might have in front of you really low fidelity prototype theory of change, or you might not, and that's fine. So just yeah, we're going to take some time in a moment in breakout rooms to share that, and I think we're going to go in sort of threes, so small groups, might be 4. Before you go, and I'm conscious of the people that might be like, yeah, I've got a theory of change, it works for us, and all of that, and also in addition to those that have just drafted a theory of change, does your theory of change consider, or what is it based on? Does it consider evidence from wider sources? How are you justifying that you focus on that context, and why that context and not another? So what's your justification? What are your assumptions there? You know, that whole thing about making it explicit? Make those assumptions explicit. And really, gold standard here is having evidence to support it. That could be research, it could be a policy report, it could be stuff that you have done in a previous iteration of the service or of the project. But really, if you're making any claims out there, what's your evidence for them? And I think sometimes we forget this in theory of change. So what this is doing is asking you to think about evidence, research, development, evaluation early on, not as a bolt-on at the end. You know, that thing that's like, oh my God, I've got to do a feedback form to quickly gather this. We're not talking about this. This is being proactive, strategic. So consider this evidence or support for what you're claiming really early on. And then what's your evidence of why you're claiming that impact or aiming towards that impact? What are the assumptions there? What's your justification? Is that based on a similar project elsewhere, something you've done before, a piece of research? I don't know. It could be anything. But you've got to back it up, right? We can't just assume things. And how come those are outcomes? Are they outcomes that you've achieved previously, you've homed in, you've sort of focused on those and not others? Well, how come? What's that based on? And obviously, how come the stuff you do? How come those conditions you create? So your service runs 3 nights a week, and actually you think it should run 5 nights a week. I don't know. And that could be based on another service elsewhere, or a piece of research you saw, or a report that you saw. It could be a blog, could be anything. So it can be really quite formal. It can equally be informal, that good mixture of evidence backing it up. And then obviously, you know, your evidence of equality. And there's some really lovely models out there that, again, a coffee catch up could share some of those, where some lovely ones where particularly coming out of the Centre for Youth Impact, again, related to youth, but could totally be applied, where we decide together what good looks like. And then we might go and do some peer observations to ensure that we're consistently achieving good. And so that's what we're talking about there. So you already might have evidence for your theory of change. You might not have put it onto that lovely infographic you've got on your website or whatever, but you will know it. Your fundraisers will have it, won't they? Because they'll have hopefully been justifying what they're doing in funding reports and things like that, or funding bids rather. So you might be coming up with questions relating to your theory of change. And I just say, what's your evidence for that? You know, who said, how come? And really look to think about that. So there's some of the questions you might be coming up with. So I'm going to stop talking and sharing, and gonna make sure that you're good to go with the chat, Debbie, with the breakout room, sorry. And if there's any questions before we go in there, you can feel free to ask them. If not, note them while you're in your breakout room, and we can come back and have a bit of a Q&A.
Yeah, I can set up the room. So I just wondered if you can just repeat how much time people have and what you're exactly asking from them, so we're really clear on.
Thank you. Yes. So I reckon let's take about 8 minutes. Would that work? Kind of a couple of minutes each. It's really just sort of going, okay, this is landing for me, or this is my response, or this is what really resonates for me, and these are any questions I might have coming up that I might want to make sure I note in the chat or get answered before I leave. I hope that makes sense. Any questions about the ask before you go into breakout rooms? Okay.
All right.
Awesome.
I'll send you off, and you'll have 8 minutes.
Thanks, Debbie. I don't know if it's me that's slow or Zoom that's slow, or other people are just slow at leaving there.
Sometimes. Tina and Katie, do you want to join the rooms?
They look like they're frozen. Yeah, they had. They're lost in cyberspace.
Yeah. And sometimes, you know, you get to one of these sessions and something comes up and you're still in it, but you're just dealing with an emergency on the side.
Yeah.
Katie, that's us assuming that you, don't worry, Colin and Catherine can have a chat.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, thank you, Debbie.
All right. It's going well.
Yeah, I've chucked a lot of stuff at folks. But yeah,
lots of good, like, proper takeaways though, and I personally like that.
Yeah, I think that combined, oh, there we go. Combined with kind of those jam boards and all of that, and I hadn't thought to get the links to those ready for the chat. That was a bit of a slip on my part, but people access them after.
I think Nigel thought he needed to go in. I thought it was like a Miro board. You go in, so I think he just, because he managed after I repeated how to do it. So it's so good.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the chat now. I've got the chance.
There isn't much happening in the chat. Just Catherine recognizing the shout out.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is nice of it too. It's one group of two, but it's Nigel. Nigel chats. So.
Yeah, he's very chatty, isn't he? I've been in a breakout group with Nigel before. He's very excited and animated. Yeah.
Yeah, you're happy with your time? You were saying you're.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've still got quite a lot I want to throw at
I have
people.
half an hour left once they come back.
Yeah. So I think I'll do you know what? We could open the Slido, and if people have got questions, they can put them in the Slido and we can be gathering them as we go, potentially. Or I don't know if that complicates it, because
well, I think people just not asking questions. I don't think it matters if we use Slido, because people know how to use the chat function.
Yeah, let's stick with chat.
They just yeah. Did you have any polls? No.
No. Oh yes, I have got one. I just haven't activated it because
okay.
I was going to activate it in case we used the Q&A, and I didn't want people to get confused between the two.
Yeah. So
I'll activate that at the end. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that wasn't even part of my vocabulary a couple of years ago. Like, activate the Slido. What?
I've learned from you now. You can do this annotation. I'm like, oh, this is really fun.
Yeah, don't even have to go to a Miro board. You can annotate.
No, you can do this then and there. It's nice.
Nothing like Miro. Miro is amazing. Yeah, Annotate is good, right?
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah. Did you want to? Do you want to have a look at your slides to see with half an hour that if you need to kind of?
Yeah, I've had a little look. It's fine. I think what we might do is, if folks have got questions, to pop them in the chat as they're coming back while they're fresh. And we could, I mean, if some are coming through quite quickly, I can address a couple. And if not, we'll have time at the end. So I'll give them a bunch more stuff, but it's quite easy to nip through this last stuff, and it's all takeaways. So they can go back to it, I suppose, at a later date.
Yeah, if we give them a couple, like 2 minutes or something, to kind of put their question in the chat, if they do from.
Yeah.
We're still quite 35 seconds. Do you want me to kind of remind you when there's 10 minutes left?
I would really like you to do that.
Yeah.
That'd be great. That'd be lovely, actually. Yeah, I can get excited.
Now I do that too, and then it's like, oh, there's 2 minutes, I need to wrap up.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I've learned being part of this, is to really lean into that facilitation. And David is my colleague who I'm like, he looks so at ease. So I'm like, okay, I'm just channeling my inner David, just stand there and just like, no nerves, it's all under control, it's no stress.
It's fine. It's like, oh, my slides aren't working. Why is that not working? And it's like, and I think, do you know what? People have been there. They're all doing it.
Exactly. So, that's the other thing.
I get it.
Forget it. People are a bit more understanding because they've all had to do it or doing it. Yeah.
And I think it shows we're human and that we're all in this together and all of that sort of stuff. Yeah.
I should be coming back soonish. It might be another minute. My countdown is on 15, but I think then they get the 1 minute warning.
Oh, they get a minute then.
Yeah.
See, that's the other thing about Teams. When you bring them back from breakout room, flat, no warning, flat, they come straight back. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a bit, yeah, you can do that here, but I do like the countdown. And some people just decide to come back early. Some people can just wrap up.
Yeah, it's less abrupt.
Yeah. looks like they're all very chatty.
Great.
Yeah. Welcome back. For a second, and then everybody should be coming back.
Okay. All right. I think that's everybody back. Fab. Thanks, folks. I'm really aware that you only had 8 minutes, which seems like you might have been robbed a little bit there. But I'm just conscious of time and getting that balance right. And I just want to give you as much stuff as possible so as you can take away and digest it. And that offer of kind of helping with applying it in a virtual coffee is still there. So with time in mind, if you've got questions that are coming up, just start adding them while they're fresh into the chat. And we'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. But it's questions that other people might have. So please put anything in there. And if we don't address them now, we'll try and address them at the end. There's a bit of a chunkier section at the end for addressing questions, or I'll come back on questions specifically, but unless they are in the chat, I won't know to come back to them. So take a couple of minutes, add any questions into the chat. It could also be thoughts of what's resonating or whatever. So yeah, please do that and take a couple of minutes to do it. Okay, Tina, you're like, I know when you put something in earlier about understanding, I was like, yes, Tina. Any tips on ensuring theory of change is embedded across an organisation? For me, and this is a little bit kind of aspirational, gold standard, so you could maybe work down from it, it needs to be supported by governance, leadership, impact culture, all of that kind of thing. And if theory of change is at the heart of impact culture, then it could be you really make sure that everybody in the leadership understands that, everybody in the management structure, the practitioners, it's all understood. When I've done theory of change workshops before, and there might be people that have done these themselves, I've really, the best ones have been when it's been co-created by a bunch of different stakeholders. So I did one recently a couple of months ago, and there was a trustee in there was participants in there were managers, there were practitioners, there was a bunch of different people, and we co-created their theory of change and went through exactly the process that we just did, and indeed what I'm going to do in a moment. And so that really helped it be embedded at all different elements of the organisation, top down, bottom up, however you want to call it. So for me, that's important, and that links back to that culture, making space and time and resources for that. Tina, does that help? Yeah, okay, bit of a nod. Okay, I'll look at one of the other questions and then we'll probably crack on and I'll come back to you. Okay, so how the quality aspect within the theory of change can be evaluated or understood. Brilliant. I'm going to make a note for myself to, in the follow-up email with slides and stuff, to include an example of that. I alluded to it when I was rambling on and giving you loads of input, but there's ways and tools to measure quality. Poor choice of words there, to understand quality. And so one of those could be a tool called the YPQI. I have no idea what that stands for. Youth Programme Quality Inventory, maybe. Anyway, I can send links to it. And that's the thing where it's like, we decide what good looks like. and then we go and observe each other, and young people or participants can observe us, so as we can make sure that we are consistently achieving good by our measure, not someone else's. So that's a really lovely way that you can kind of make sure that that can be evaluated and understood throughout, and making sure that you can be observing other brilliant practitioners and learning from them and all of that, creating that learning culture. Okay, I've noted the other questions and hopefully we'll come back to them. And like I said, if we don't, I will respond to them after this. So I'm going to crack on. I'm going to share my screen, and so you just maybe have been talking about a draft theory of change or whatever, and I just encouraged you to think about the evidence of it. I'm not going to go to present mode deliberately. I always think that's a risk though, because you can see my toolbar at the top and what other browsers I've got open. Yes, I am considering bikepacking in Spain. Or dreaming about it is probably not a reality, is it? Anyway, the reason I'm doing that is because I wanted to have this nod to return on investment or social return on investment. Okay, and I wanted to link across to this website here. This is one example. I found them helpful. I've been on their one of their trainings quite a while ago now, but it was very helpful. So NEF, which is New Economics Foundation, I think, and what they say here is they're talking about social return on investment. So this part here is quite helpful. So it's developed from traditional cost benefit analysis, which we may be familiar or may not be. And what they've done is say, yeah, but we want to measure the social good. So how do we go about measuring that social good? Just to point out as well that it's not just me that bangs on about theory of change. Look over here, they're talking about social impact and they're talking about theory of change. It's right in there with it. It's not just me that's obsessed with it. And so what they've tried to do, or what social return on investment tries to do, is take that kind of, I don't know, unemployment is costing this, mental health is costing this, and then they say what the cost of their services or their intervention or whatever, and they kind of relate the two. That's what you might think of a cost benefit analysis. That's my very simple understanding of it. And what social return on investment tries to do is to add social value to that. Those things like self-esteem that are the core component parts to employability, say, and making sure that we really are showing that within our understanding. Now, I have to put my hands up and say I explored this a couple of years ago, and it blew my mind a bit, because it is a participatory approach to this. So it's about it being co-created with service users or participants, and so them kind of creating the value that goes with a particular intervention and interaction, an increase in self-worth or whatever. So it's massive, absolutely massive social return on investment, and that is where my knowledge ceases. So I'm being very honest with you, but I'm signposting you here. And there are lots of other people that are looking at social return on investment and that are excellent at it. I don't know, there could be people in the room that might have done this, but it's a wicked big calculation. It's a wicked big training program. But yes, I think we should be considering it. I think it's an important one. Go and have a look at it and consider it. Do I think it's the be all and end all? Absolutely not. And if we're thinking about triangulating different data collection methods, so as we're not just relying on any one source, you know what, really helpful. And there's a lot of people that are promoting this, so there's a lot to be written out there. But that being said, I know not much else about it, but I wanted to give it a nod. Okay, so cracking on, and we're going to have time at the end for potentially a breakout group, but maybe not, but definitely time for Q&A and all of that sort of stuff. From now until that point, I'm going to chuck a lot more stuff at you, so I hope that's okay. I hope the resources you're getting are okay, like loads of takeaways to kind of play about with after the session. Okay, so here's the thing. We really need to link theory of change with impact investigation or measurements, however you want to call that. And so just as a reminder, we really focused on our why. What do we want to know? And so what are our questions? These could be some questions relating to theory of change. So it could be you've got questions about, are we working with the target participants identified in the context? Do we achieve the intended impact? That's a classic one, isn't it? Do participants achieve the intended outcomes? Can we attribute outcomes to our programme, or which particular mechanisms of our programme? That's a big one. Attribution is a really important one, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And did we achieve this consistently well? And so that might allow us to say things like this. And when I say reporting, I don't mean just to the funders. I mean things we want to say, things we want to shout about on our website, on our this, that, and the other. We worked with X participants with X need from the context. We achieved X impact to contribute to that context. Participants achieved X outcomes, attribution of outcomes was linked to X specific mechanisms, and we can say that we consistently had quality across all of those programs. Okay, so the linking factor here is obviously we've got to do some data collection to go about doing this. So this is how we go about doing it and the specific what's of how we go about doing it. So again, another shout out to NPC. It's getting boring now, isn't it, with NPC, but they came up with this really helpful 5 types of data, and I've just used this for I don't know, it's a bit of a foundation for me. And it's very colourful, which always is attractive to me. So they talk about user data, they talk about engagement data, feedback data, outcomes, and impact. Okay. And they helpfully link it to questions, which is what we've been trying to encourage. So you can see that there. The thing that's particularly important about this and helpful is the part on the far right-hand side that says frequency. So, and it says routine, occasional, or exceptional. So for me, that is about user data. Probably you should be collecting that from everybody that you're interacting with in your service or project. So 100% that should be. And that reduces down, and just don't expect to be gathering data about impact from 100%. It's just not going to be realistic. So it reduces down. So that could be, I don't know, 5 to 10%. And I think that's also very helpful. Because if you're setting out your impact plan, which we're going to talk about in a moment, just be realistic, I suppose, with how much of what type of data you'll be able to collect. Okay, so we can use that as a framework, as a template for an impact plan. And this is if theory of change was the big chunky takeaway from the first part, this is the big chunky takeaway from the second part. I'm going to give you a bit of a template, and again, this will be available in slides after, or I think Debbie's put the link in the chat, but you can, just lift that template and adapt it to whatever works for you. So down that left-hand column, I've put those 5 types of data, and now we're getting into, okay, what will we collect? Which tool will we use? When? Linking it to the big questions and the theory of change. So let's take these one at a time. So user data, I'm sure folks are familiar with this. In fact, I'm sure you've got systems or spreadsheets, I don't know, that are already doing this. Now, when you start thinking about impact and thinking about more, just remember, what have you got consent for already? Because this might be different. So make sure that people are informed and you've done that, and you've got all those privacy things covered. So this could be their basic demographics. Let's go with gender, age, ethnicity, your basic demographics that you might be collecting. You could be collecting those from your personal information form that people fill in out at the beginning, a referral form, things like that. But again, making sure that you're allowed to use it in your impact measurement. And I mean, obviously, you're collecting this at the start of their engagement or just before they engage. And this is really helping answer this big question of, are we working with the people we intended? You know, if we intended to work with 16 to 18-year-olds, and actually the people that are coming through the service are 14 to 15, well, we're not working with the right people, right? How come? And we've got some data now to say, okay, we really need to explore that. The next set of data is engagement data. Again, you're probably really familiar with this. So it could be hits on your website, uses of your new chatbot that you have introduced because you've been working with Catalyst, or number of people that come to the after school club, I don't know. But it's really monitoring that attendance of the programs. This is my kind of bias of where I come from. And that could be, I don't know, from multiple forms, from a register to a sign-in sheet to, I don't know, you've probably got some clever digital thing that calculates stuff for you now, having been through this program. And you might capture that throughout the program. It might be at specific time periods. You might want to compare specific time periods. And that could be compare morning and evening, or it could be compare summer to winter months. I don't know. And what you're really, the questions you're trying to answer there is, how successful have we been at engaging people? So have we engaged the right people, the people we said we would in the one above? And have we been successful? And are our mechanisms of change the right things to engage those people? So you might be asking those questions of how many, how much, how often, at what times, and that really helps with that mechanisms of change, evidence-based. So that obviously is going to be backed up with feedback data, okay? And so this is that classic stuff, the feedback from participants, their significant others, whoever. And that could be, yeah, what was good, what could be improved, what could stop. Classic 3 questions. A classic activity that I've used to measure that, or a tool I've used, sorry, is a traffic light activity. And I might do that at a specific time point or at the end of a particular phase of a project. And it's really asking if we've got the mechanisms of change right. It's tricky, and there's often a response bias that can happen here. So we have to be cautious of that, but that's going into a little bit too much detail. But yeah, one of those tools, this tool is on that companion website for the book. So gathering feedback in creative ways, I think is pretty important, rather than that classic at the end asking feedback. So yeah, this is contributing to those mechanisms of change questions as well as quality. And then we get onto the outcome stuff, and we may be pretty familiar with doing distance travel tools to say, this is where you were at the start and this is where you are now. We have helped you achieve that outcome. And this is the link back to that. Be careful with that before and after. Could you do it retrospectively to ask and ascertain any change there? How could you be creative in asking those questions? And also you can use observations here. You draw in other people that might be a carer or a partner or a probation worker or whoever, a practitioner that can triangulate that data. You can ask this of multiple people to draw from different sources, and that's also really good to, maybe if you're doing a consultation with the particular service user, it can be a really helpful developmental tool for your practice. And this is where I really wanted to introduce that attribution thing. So you can ask them if outcomes have changed, if there's a change score in that. And also, what was it about our project that might have contributed to that? That's really important to get that attribution question in there. Same again for impact. That attribution question is really important, but obviously you're doing this at a later date, and it's harder to do because you might lose track of them and things like that. But this impact data is the stuff of really good, rich case studies. Okay, that's when that comes in. And no, you're not going to have a case study from every service user. Okay, so I can see people writing notes and all of that. So I'm sure you would be able to apply that to your context, which would be really helpful for you to kind of make that link between theory of change, reporting what you want to say. This is the data collection, how you might do that. Okay, so we are 18 minutes past. I am going to encourage you now to think about so what. We've done some why, some how, and some what there. So now I'm going to encourage you to think about so what and what next. So it may be that you might need to go away and redraft your theory of change, get your old theory of change and, give it a revamp. And I really encourage you to test that out with and co-create it with a range of stakeholders. I'd also encourage you to do that RAG rating of your theory of change. Have you got evidence, who said, why that particular impact or that outcome? And from that, you can create those first impact questions related to your theory of change, and that could be your foundation. You can come up with different questions beyond that that will be more intricate and all those things, and then you can make that impact plan. And you folks will be used to now that kind of thought of, let's do cycles of this. So it might be we're focusing on user data for the next quarter, and we're not going to think about collecting data on anything else. Or you might have that nailed and we're going to focus on outcomes data. So maybe introducing sprints into that impact plan would be a really cool thing to do. But again, that's getting pretty complex. So you might also want to think about that data collection and how you go about that, not just the tools you use, but how you analyze it and who is going to analyze it. And do they need some more skills or whatever to be able to do that? And you might also already have monitoring systems in place, like, I don't know, views or some of those other systems, those big hitters that are there that people are using to monitor and track participants. And then you might want to think about impact reporting and creating amazingly awesome infographics that go with it. But there's a few steps before that. And then there's the stuff that you might have parked along the way. Like, I really want to know about 15 and 16-year-olds rather than, this age group. And it's like, okay, I need to park that. We'll come back to it. Were there specific themes or trends that were coming up? Okay, so what's next for you and your action planning? We're on 21 minutes past, so I'm just thinking on my feet now. We're probably not going to have time to go into a breakout room, but it might be really nice to hear people or see in the chat, what is the first next step you want to take? What is that thing that you really need to consider? And as you're typing or as you're reading other people as they reflect in the chat there, it would be really lovely to kind of really make a few notes for yourself. So what will catalyze this for you to do something about it? Been to this workshop, this person chanted on about all of this stuff. We got a bunch of resources in an email. What next? Okay. So I am going to stop sharing and come back to the chat.
Tina's already saying she's going to look, try and find some time to look at all the resources to digest it.
Yeah, making that time to look at all of that would be great. And if what helps with that is chucking a couple of questions in an email or in a community group, or taking that step to going to find an impact network nearby, that might be helpful to keep that momentum going. Yeah. Okay, I'm just reading the Salford CFS one from before. The challenge as an infrastructure support organisation is about how do we claim the impact of our work when it's VCS groups organisation achieve their impact. Interesting. I'm just about to do some work with an infrastructure organisation about their theory of change. So that's very interesting. And so it would be, I would suggest, what is it that you want to achieve as an infrastructure organisation, and what will the indicators of that be? And then, so for some, your infrastructure organisations, are they able to feed into your theory of change and your evidence gathering? And so an indicator might be all of the people that organisations we support go on a theory of change training. I don't know. And that would be an indicator that you're like, okay, we're building this in now. Does that make sense, Anne-Marie?
Yeah, it's just one of those tricky things that we've always struggled with. You know, some things are quite obvious. You know, we administer grants for our local CCG, so it's actually a lot easier. And we've had, you know, annual reports, you know, where we've had, you know, search organizations coming in doing, like, you know, the return on investment. That's because it's very self-contained. But I manage the development team, and we provide information, advice and guidance. And it's actually quite hard at times. Some things are quite obvious where it's been, you know, say we've helped someone with a Reaching Communities grant and we've supported with the planning. We've trained them, we've planned, you know, the bid with them, we've proofread it with them. It gets submitted, you know, it gets approved. We can say, well, we've actually physically supported that. But actually there's some groups that we've worked with over the years where we've, you know, like they've came in with an idea, we've helped them set up, they've evolved their legal structures, we've helped them with policy procedures, they've done all our training. And then further down the line, they apply and get that Reaching Communities, but, can we attribute, because, we haven't had that physical hands-on with that Reaching Communities bid, but they're in a place because they've gone through our process to be in a position to apply for it. So it's a really tricky one.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, fantastic that you're using that word attribute. And it's like, okay, well, we need to ask them to start with. And it might be that we have different indicators of that. Okay, so it might be that we helped really early days and that was that. But that's all we aim to, actually, because they're this and this.
Yeah. Because
asking them,
because what we report back on to our funders, because we had issues about they were wanting to report back, every 6 months, we go back 6 months, but actually we'd be seeing stuff come through. We've worked with the group for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years. And so what we do now is do a case study as part of our report back to our funders. So we have a growth case study. So we actually go through, just say, this is how we worked with them so many years ago, and this is the outcome they've had, this quarter. They've, expanded what they've done, they've changed their legal structure, whatever. But we kind of do that narrative because it's so short term, some of these things. But that's because that funder in particular is our council. So we get a council grant, so they've funded us for years. So we can actually say, that impact of that 5, 7, 8 years has come to fruition at this point.
Yeah,
but it's difficult.
It's really difficult, but I'm trying to draw out some elements of what you're saying there that are more generalizable for other folks, because there's a couple of brilliant things in there. Firstly, the case study thing, and if you step back from, that whole frequency thing, I said it might be 100% for user data and it might reduce down to 10% for impact data, and that's your case studies. But there's the thing with case studies that you might cherry pick the good ones. And actually, maybe you need some case studies of those folks that it wasn't successful, because that's where the learning comes to, or whatever. And the key point about that, and that could be about impact or outcomes data or whatever, because again, what you're talking about, there's outcomes data in there, is that it's a representative sample. And that's really important. And representation could be a number of different ways. And you're really explicit about that. We will have a representative sample based on, I don't know, how much money they got in their bid, or more generalizable things like ethnicity, employability, all of those sort of things. But that would, I'd say, be the thing, as well as triangulating, which I think you're doing as well. And some people call this crystallizing, in as much as not relying on one source of data, not just relying on case studies, but we're relying on all of those other things so they can all support each other. So we work with all of these folks, and these were some of the trends we were finding, and then this and this, and here's a case study of that that's representative. That's lovely. That. I think everyone should maybe go and chat to Anne-Marie about how they're doing it. Okay,
because we do a state of the sector survey, and we've just it's just been launched, so we do use that quite a lot with our stakeholders, you know, to influence things. So, but yeah, it's been a bit skewed because we did it during the pandemic last year, so it's it's difficult.
Everything's a bit skewed, yeah, for sure. Okay, thank you, Anne-Marie. I'm just having a quick glimpse at the chat, and quite wonderfully, other people are putting stuff in there. Thank you. So this is brilliant. This is about the community, isn't it? People saying, we use this. Really cool. And I'm familiar with a couple of those and not with others, so thank you. This is where I will be different after it as well. So I'm just looking at a couple of those and just bearing in mind we've only got 1 minute left. So what I might do is we'll save the chat and I'll respond to it directly in the follow-up email. And I don't know, it might be easier to do a Loom or something like that, but I will definitely do that. The last thing to do is obviously to say thank you for participating, and if you're not dashing off really quickly, because we are all in back-to-back meetings these days, or maybe we're not, maybe you've done better than me, is Debbie, I wonder if you could put the link to the Slido in the chat, and I'll make sure it's live, and that is just a poll that just asks what's been the most helpful takeaway or something that you really want to remember. If you just add that into the Slido, and we can keep that live actually, so we can send it out afterwards, and just give us a bit of feedback about what's most useful. Thanks, Debbie, for putting that into the chat. Most helpful takeaway that you really want to remember. And if you don't want to do that now because you need to dash off, please dash off. I can hang about for a couple of minutes if people have got burning stuff, or if they want to share anything, and we can make sure I can catch up with it after. Debbie, I don't know if you want to add anything at this point.
No, just to say that we'll follow it up with an email with all the resources, not just what Lucy has shared, but Catherine and what others have shared. I've made sure I've got those windows open, so we'll add it all. So if you close a window, don't stress. We'll send everything through to you in an email today or tomorrow probably. So I hope you enjoyed the session, and thank you, Lucy, for a wonderful facilitation and the kind offer to follow up with people outside the session. It's very appreciated.
Yeah, no worry. Thanks everybody.